Well, James Luther Adams, the renowned Unitarian theologian, would have celebrated his 124th birthday last month. Adams, or JLA, as he came to be called by students, colleagues, and friends, was the most influential theologian among American UUs during the 20th century. And not only that, but he's considered one of the finest 20th century American liberal Christian theologians in general. So why is JLA so important to us as Unitarian Universalists? Well, a lot of what we consider the bedrock ideas of Unitarian Universalism comes to us from JLA. First, though, let's talk a little bit about who he was. According to his entry on the Dictionary of Unitarian and Universalist Biography website, quote, Adams' path to Unitarianism was similar to that of many members of Unitarian Universalist congregations. He grew up in a fundamentalist Christian family in Eastern Washington. At home and at church, the day of judgment heralding the end of time was constantly held up as a real possibility, perhaps coming very soon. As a college student at the University of Minnesota, Adams was, in his own words, on the rebound from fundamentalism. He railed against organized religion and briefly embraced an atheistic form of humanism. Eventually, however, he began to attend meetings of the Saturday Men's Club of the Unitarian Church, and was soon listening to the Unitarian preaching of the Reverend John Dietrich, a leading proponent of another type of humanism, at once scientific and religious. One of his professors, Frank Rehrig, a Unitarian, saw that young Adams' outbursts against religion came from a passionately religious impulse. In a career counseling session, Rehrig calmly told Adams, much to his consternation, that he would be a minister. The, quote, raving humanist astonished his friends when, upon completion of his undergraduate work in 1924, he left for Harvard Divinity School to begin preparation for the Unitarian ministry. Now, this is where I figured JLA and I got a lot in common, because I had the same kind of reaction to being convinced to go to seminary. In his journal article, Awakening to History, The Prophecy of James Luther Adams, George K. Beach says, quote, Adams' career from the 1930s on, notably as a prime mover behind the renewal efforts of the original Unitarian Commission on Appraisal, has been marked by protest against the spiritual and theological desertification of liberal religion. His various writings on the history of liberalism in the modern era provides the basis for recognizing that the laissez-faire principle, which still holds sway among Unitarian Universalists, individual freedom of belief, is a holdover from the discredited ideal of classical liberal economics. Beach continues, Adams has taken hold of the liberal religious chain at its weakest link, the doctrine of the church. He has made the historical community of faith central, and around it has forged new links, the reappropriation of the historical roots of the Free Church in the Radical Reformation of the 16th and 17th centuries, the reappropriation of the theological basis of congregational self-government through the biblical concept of covenant, the recognition of the role of voluntary association, the secular twins of the free churches in a free society, the correlative recognition of our ethical responsibility to participate in associations which shape public policy, the philosophical shift from rationalism to voluntarism, a shift from the primacy of religious understanding to the primacy of religious commitment, the recovery of the historical and prophetic conception of religion itself from the pietistic captivity into which it falls ever again. So for Adams, he could not separate his faith from the social justice concerns of the day. As a minister in Salem, he shared the message of the nearby striking Peacoat Mills textile workers. And between 1935 and 1936, JLA worked to oppose Nazis in Germany. He was interrogated by the Gestapo and nearly imprisoned for his involvement with the underground church movement. He filmed, using his own home movie camera, interviews with the leading theologians, Karl Barth, Albert Schweitzer, and others, including those who were involved in clandestine church-related resistance groups, as well as pro-Nazi leaders of the so-called German Christian Church. Now, again, from the Dictionary of Unitarian Universalist Biography, Adams returned to the United States more convinced than ever that the tendency of religious liberals to be theologically content with vague slogans and platitudes about open-mindedness could only render liberal churches irrelevant and impotent in the face of the world's evils, and he stated his convictions loudly and frequently. Now, that was in the 1930s, nearly 100 years ago, and yet it could have been written today and still be relevant. Well, what else do we know about JLA's theology? Well, we have his words in the back of the Greg hymnals, and we had it as our reading, and I'm going to read it again because it's important. I call that church free. I call that church free, which enters into covenant with the ultimate source of existence, that sustaining and transforming power not made with human hands. It binds together families and generations, protecting against the idolatry of any human claim to absolute truth or authority. This covenant is the charter and responsibility and joy of worship in the face of death as well as life. I call that church free, which brings individuals into a caring, trusting fellowship that protects and nourishes their integrity and spiritual freedom, that yearns to belong to the church universal, is open to insight and conscience from every source. It bursts through rigid tradition, giving rise to new and living language, to new and broader fellowship. It is a pilgrim church, a servant church, on an adventure of the Spirit. The goal is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, the one for the liberty of prophesying, the other for the ministry of healing. It aims to find unity and diversity under the promptings of the Spirit that bloweth where it listeth and maketh all things new. Now, JLA was a big proponent of voluntary association, which means that we don't drag you in here, make you join us, keep you here against your will, or shun you if you choose to leave. No, the beauty of our tradition, both before and after the merger of the Unitarians and Universalists in 1961, the beauty is that we are covenantal. JLA understood that the very nature of being covenantal meant that everyone makes a choice to be here because we're all working towards a better world together. But what other legacy does JLA give us? Well, one of his most well-known pieces is the 5 smooth stones of religious liberalism. Now, the stones represent the 5 smooth stones that David picked to fight Goliath in the passage from the Hebrew Scriptures. For JLA, we are to use these 5 smooth stones to build a more just, loving, and free world. The 5 stones represent 1, that revelation is continuous. 2, relationships ought to rest on a mutual and free consent. 3, we need to work together for a just and loving community. 4, we have a commitment to express our faith in society. And 5, that we live in hope. I want to repeat those because they're important. Revelation is continuous. We are a living tradition. 2, relationships ought to rest on mutual and free consent. 3, we need to work together for a just and loving community. 4, we have a commitment to express our faith in society. And 5, we live in hope. Now, I can't talk about the 5 smooth stones without also sharing about the 5 jagged rocks. Now, these statements were created by Reverend Nancy Bowen, Reverend Mike Moran, and others within the Mountain Desert District of the UUA. Now, much like JLA took inspiration from the Hebrew Scripture story that tells us we can accomplish quite a bit with the right tools, this group took inspiration from JLA and tells us that these 5 jagged rocks recognize that Unitarian Universalism is rough around the edges. We aren't perfect. I hate to break that to you. Yes, we, as you use, screw it up sometimes. And so the 5 jagged rocks help us to remember that we still have work to do in here to get the smooth stones to use out there. So the 5 jagged rocks of Unitarian Universalism are: there is a unity that makes us one. All souls are sacred and worthy. Courageous love transforms the world. Truth continues to be revealed. And salvation is in this life. I'm going to repeat those too. There is a unity that makes us one. All souls are sacred and worthy. Courageous love transforms the world. Truth continues to be revealed. And salvation is in this life. In her 2021 Quest article about the 5 jagged rocks, Carrie Gottfried sums up both sets of stones this way. Quote, I believe that Unitarian Universalism has the potential to be life-changing, and many of us know that firsthand. But too often we shy away from using the tools to share it with the world, and often that is because we just don't know where to start. And I know this to be true. It's hard, right, to distill down this pluralistic, inclusive, liberal, and liberating faith to an elevator pitch. I know that. When I've tabled at Pride or UCF Market Days, I often say that we are a denomination where we strive to create a safe and supportive space for you to deconstruct, reconstruct, construct from scratch, whatever your spiritual journey. I'm not here to give you answers or wave a magic wand. I am here. We are all here to help you ask the questions you need to find your answers. We're here to support you through that journey when it gets bumpy. We're here to work together to make sure that we are creating beloved community both in here and out there. As JLA himself used to say, church is a place where you get to practice what it means to be human. It's where we can get messy and make mistakes. A place where we learn to clean up those messes and repair those mistakes. And part of what we do here in Unitarian Universalism is to work out what it means to be human, to live in a society, to take care of one another, and to work towards love and justice. For JLA, he could not separate his justice work from his theology. In his book, The Prophethood of All Believers, he says, quote, "Everyone is a theologian, either conscious or unconscious, in the sense that everyone has some conception of the nature of reality, of the demands of reality, and of those elements in reality that support or threaten meaningful existence. Everyone is a theologian." That's the beauty of this tradition, this denomination, this faith. Every single one of us gets to wrestle with our concepts of the nature of reality, the nature of systems, the nature of oppressions, and work out how to use the 5 smooth stones as tools for a better world. James Luther Adams is part of our history, and we are part of his legacy. His ideas of what makes a church free, of what it means to be a voluntary association, that revelation is continuous, that relationships are built on mutual and free consent, that we need to work together to build a just community, and that we have a commitment to express our faith in society, and that we live in hope. These ideas help us move and live and have our being in the world. And they also help inform us of how we need to be within this community. That there is a unity that makes us one, that all souls are sacred and worthy, that courageous love transforms the world, that truth continues to be revealed, and that salvation is in this life. Together, your hand in mine, so that together we may do the work neither of us can do alone. Together, we have the opportunity to share the good news of our liberal and liberating tradition. We can build onto this legacy of our tradition, of our history, of all the teachers and theologians and thinkers and doers that make us up. We can keep that legacy alive and build onto it to pass down as our own legacy here. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so.